goal as, there we go. Now I can start. So our goal as part of the OpenEMR
First,
community.
introduce yourself.
Okay. Yep. So I'm Stephen Nielson. I'm one of the OpenEMR developers, much like many of you. And I've helped to create quite a bit of the module infrastructure, as well as the fire system and some other kind of oddities here and there in the OpenEMR code base. I'll do a little bit more advanced introduction once I start my presentation. But I want to talk a little bit about the OpenEMR community and kind of the goals out of these trainings. We're hoping to be able to do this, a training, a meetup about once a month, being able to go through a topic of interest to the community, maybe have one or two longer or larger presentations, maybe a couple lightning talks, 3 to 5 or 5 to 10 minute topics about things that are in OpenEMR, things related to healthcare that are pertinent to OpenEMR, just things that we can do to get more connected, learn from each other, and possibly even connect each other to resources, whether that's for employment or work or other types of things. So that's one of my goals, and talking with Brady and some of the other kind of executive committees of OpenEMR, executive committee members of OpenEMR, is the goal of kind of broadening our community and our developer outreach. So our hope is that you'll be able to join with us and continue with coming to these sessions and even contribute, whether giving that a presentation. Maybe it's a cool module you built. Maybe it's something that you learned about inside of OpenEMR. Maybe it's something that you fixed and you're like, this is why I hated this in OpenEMR and why I had to change it. Things of that nature. So again, you get out of it often what you put into something. So the more that you put into the community, I think the more that you're going to get out of it. So that's one of my main motivations of being able to give this presentation. On that note, I wanted to just, give everybody a chance to introduce themselves, this first time around, and we'll have just a few minutes that we do that. I think each meetup we give an opportunity for people to talk about, hey, I'm looking for work, or I'm looking for someone to hire, or things of that nature. Or, hi, this is who I am. So I'd just like to maybe give everybody, just if they'd want to. If you don't want to, that's fine. But just give those who'd like to a chance to kind of introduce themselves, say, this is who I am. So I know there's a couple regulars on here, so maybe some of the new ones here. So, hey, Daniel, why don't you go ahead?
Hey there. Hey, guys. I'm Dan Flieger. I've been programming with OpenEMR for, I think, since 2017. I started working with Tony McCormick, and I've been sort of doing my own thing, doing some things here and there for MI Squared and for other customers on and off. And I'm really interested to hear more about modules, because I've been sort of playing around with it, and I think I'm doing it, but I'm not doing it the right way. And I want to learn how to do it the right way. Yeah. And I've made some of my own different modules. I have like an SMS thing for pediatricians that I'm always constantly tweaking. And at some point, I'd like to make it portable so it's available to the community. And it always helps to have people look over code and things like that. So
awesome, thank you, welcome. Anyone else?
Okay, I'll go. So my name is John Purdy. I'm Director of IT R&D at Omega Systems Group. I'm not a developer, I'm more like business operations and that sort of thing. But and I was expecting my developer to be on. I'm surprised he isn't. He's quite interested. But we're interested in modules because we're putting out a mass deployment of OpenEMR, or we hope to and expect to, over the coming months and year. And we see modules as being a crucial part of our development strategy, we have to do a fair bit of customization for the market that we're in. And we are also, of course, quite interested in the in creating an inpatient module. And we have quite a few pieces of information, and we're well on our way to having at least some of the funding we need to do that. And of course, that would be a module or probably a series of modules. So yeah, that's my interest in being here. I just want to understand this stuff at a high level, and then it's our developer's job to actually write the code and get it into the modules and stuff. So that's who I am.
Awesome. Welcome, John. Thank you. Anyone else?
I'll introduce myself. My name is Steve Klein. I think you guys are familiar with David Eschelbacher. I'm a friend of David's, and we have a software developer that he's wants to contribute. So at a high level, like the previous gentleman, I just want to hear what's going on, and so we can get just sort of get tapped into what's going on, and more to come from that. But just wanted to listen in. So appreciate you having me.
Awesome. Welcome, Stephen. We've got time for one or two more. If anyone would like to introduce themselves.
Yeah, hello. My name is Kofi Apia. I'm from Ghana. I work with Mr. John Purdy, the last but one person who introduced himself. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are looking into developing modules, and then we tried what you've done, and I really admire your work. So we decided to join in today and then to learn more, and how we can extend the core functionality of OpenEMR.
Awesome. Welcome, Kofi. Okay. Anyone else? Final call. Okay, well, I will get started. Okay. Now, I will stop as we go through from time to time to ask if there's any questions or to answer any questions that are in the chat. If you are here on your Zoom device, if you could put any questions as we're going through the material into the chat box, I will then go through those as I can. If there's something, Brady, maybe you or Jerry, if you could keep an eye on the chat, or Stephen, wait and just let me know, like if there's something kind of time sensitive that we need to get to, then I can address the question at that point in time. So let's get started. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. And we're going to come over here. Okay. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, I'm Stephen Nielson. I've been building software since I was 12. Started with open source back in the early days of Linux. My dad was the VP of a Linux company called Caldera. They were trying to compete with Red Hat at the time. Red Hat beat them to the IPO, and Caldera faded into non-existence, and its remnants ended up in lawsuits. But I went on a different pathway. So I've been involved in all kinds of different architectures, a lot of startups, mid-tier, a lot of things where I've been able to leverage open source software. And then I found myself getting into the mental health space. And that got me in a roundabout way introduced into OpenEMR about 3 or 4 years ago. When I came into OpenEMR, I said, wow, there's a lot of stuff here, but it's scattered all over the place. And I said, I'm used to working in kind of an environment like Drupal, an environment like a little bit like WordPress or other places where I can go in and I can make changes, but I'm not going to break stuff, or if I go in and I change stuff, when the next version of the software comes out, I'm not going to have to be frantically scrambling around trying to update my stuff or I'm missing out on all the security fixes because my code isn't, there. And is messing up with the core. So it seemed that there was quite a bit of patterns of where, developers would go in and add stuff in and hide it under a global flag, but it created all kinds of clutter and sometimes things you couldn't just hide away under a global flag. So I looked at that and I said, well, we've got these Zen modules, we've got these modules, this kind of hierarchy in the modules, but all they really do is load in iframes and display content inside of an iframe. So I could have, my own kind of independent piece of code, but I can't really go in and modify, if I want to have something displayed on the calendar, I can't do that. If I want to do, if I wanted to go and maybe change up how the login logic works, I can't do that, right? I need to be able to modify core code without breaking my stuff, right? So what's a module? Well, there's all kinds of different terminologies and you can argue with different people, but I view a module as a cohesive package of functionality that can operate independently of OpenEMR, right? That you can turn it on or off, you can turn on the functionality or you can turn it off, right? And as I mentioned before, it's a way of enhancing OpenEMR core, right? And it's essentially the purpose behind the module is for you to be able to connect at specific points in the code, wherever, like I said, in the login code, or whether that's in the calendar. When something happens, I want to be able to go in and do something to OpenEMR. Maybe I want to spit something out to the page. Maybe I want to send an email. Maybe I want to log some additional information. I want to do something that doesn't tightly couple me to everything that's inside of OpenEMR, right? So by putting things into a module, it allows you to be able to package up all of this cohesive functionality that can be turned on or off or given to a customer or given to the broader community. And it allows OpenEMR to meet more needs of people, different workflows. Jerry and I talk about this all the time. There's so many different workflows. People are using OpenEMR in so many different ways we can't even imagine. And trying to throw all that together, the kitchen sink together, it just creates a mess. But through a module, I can go in and add functionality that's specific to therapists, or that's specific to, nurses or occupational therapists, or whatever specialty that's there, whatever market that I'm targeting. I can have that in just a module. Another purpose behind the module is it follows solid code. Maybe some of you software developers are familiar with the solid mechanism, where code's open for extension, but it's closed for modification, right? So this allows OpenEMR to continue to work independently as long as it maintains that contract of saying, here's an event, here's a way I'm gonna call you, I'm gonna talk to you. And I'm gonna do my very best to keep that the same over many years and allow your code to then function. But OpenEMR can go and change everything around that event, up above or below in the execution flow, but your stuff can continue to operate just fine. Okay. So, as I mentioned earlier, originally we had these Zen modules. Now Zen went out of business and it got adopted by the community into this Laminas modules. They rebranded themselves as Laminas, right? And when I looked at it, there was this concept of the Laminas, and I looked and I said, oh, well, this is using the Laminas framework, but this is so complicated. It's very enterprise, which is good. I mean, OpenEMR is in many ways is an enterprise piece of software, but there's so many different kind of higher level concepts that you need to understand in terms of your presentation layer, in terms of dependency injection and all kinds of other mechanisms. I said, what if people just want to have a simple piece of code, right? And they want to just run their module and not have to have all this extra framework around it. Well, you know, we had these things called custom modules, but the code was broken. It didn't even work. So I went in and working with Jerry, we did an example with the fax module, and we built these custom modules, right? This custom module. Now we will do a follow-up presentation where we'll dive into the Laminas modules. I'll cover that a little bit today, but we'll do a more advanced topic because we'll have to talk through things like dependency injection. We'll have to talk through hot loading and some of the caching and some of the service containers that are there that are involved in the Laminas modules. There's a lot more concepts involved in order to do that module right, or to do those modules right. And it is a great framework if you're going to build something that is going to be, I don't know, 100,000, 50,000 lines of code, maybe even a couple 100,000 lines of code, where the framework is going to force you to follow really good design patterns that work in large teams, right? But if you're doing something simple, couple week project, couple month project, this is where custom modules will really shine, because you can have the flexibility of doing whatever you want, right? And again, if you wanted to in a custom module, you could even include something like Laravel. I know somebody mentioned that on the forum. You know, go and bundle in a Laravel framework. You could do whatever you want inside of custom module. So let me talk. Well, first off, in terms of any questions, anybody have any questions up to this point of what I've discussed or talked about? Can't see the chat. Let's see.
The chat's empty. You're okay. I'll monitor it.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the life cycle of a module. Okay. So where do modules begin? Where are they born? You know, well, when a programmer and globals.php get together, you know, a module can be born, right? So globals.php, those of you who have done quite a bit of development in OpenEMR, you know, it's included at the top of pretty much every page. That's where our globals are pulled from the database, where everything is instantiated. Globals.php is going to kick off this module process, right? And after it's loaded up all those globals, it's going to instantiate a class called the modules application. And it's going to instantiate this inside of an OpenEMR kernel. You can think of the kernel as a container, essentially the main dependency injection container, if you know much about that, right? Kind of the core gem of where we'll move a lot of things eventually into. But the kernel is going to instantiate this module application, right? And because everything was kind of tightly integrated into the Laminas framework, the modules application is going to instantiate the Laminas framework, and then it's going to first launch all of the Laminas modules, right? I'll jump into the code in just a second just to show this in a little bit. At that point, it's going to load up our application.config.php file. And it'll go through all of our core modules. Anything that's been marked as active in the database, it will load. And then it's going to instantiate that Laminas module by calling its init file. All right. Let me just show that a little bit in the code here. So we're going to come here to our Zen module. We're going to go here to our config, and I'm also going to open up our modules application, and we're going to go to globals.php. Okay, so globals does its thing, and let me zoom up on this here.
I don't know if it's showing up for the screen.
Yeah, sorry. I stopped my screen share.
Yeah.
I needed that was
there we go.
Okay. How's that?
That looks great. Looks great. There's this box in the bottom right. I'm not, it's gone. It's gone.
Yeah. Okay. Is that good? Is that text look big enough for people right there?
Yeah, that works. That works.
Okay. Okay. Let's Move that down a little bit. Okay. So globals.php is going to go and do its thing, run through a bunch of code, and then it's going to instantiate this modules application, passing in the kernel and a bunch of file paths. Okay. Modules application is going to go in and instantiate a bunch of Laminas, the Laminas framework, right? With its service manager and event dispatcher and a bunch of other stuff that it needs in order to run this end module. Right. I don't know if this is too big. A little bit harder to see. But it's going to go through and grab all of our modules where they're active and all of that stuff. And then it's going to run, after all the Laminas modules have been run, it's going to bootstrap our custom modules. Okay. Now the custom modules, let me just jump into that lifecycle a little bit more. The custom modules are going to be retrieved by their installation sequence, right? So the order that a user installs a module is the order that it will run. Okay. And again, as I mentioned, it's important to note that custom modules are loaded after the OpenEMR Laminas module. So the module application is going to loop through each activated module, and it's going to search for a very specific file. This openemr.bootstrap.php file, right? We can see that here. It's going to grab all the modules that aren't a Zen module. That's what that is here, ordered by the installation and the date. Right. And then it's going to go and it's going to look for this custom module name, openemr.bootstrap.php. And then important for you to know is that these modules are loaded in their own kind of isolated context. So if anyone's used my skeleton module, and we'll jump into that second, it's going to have the event dispatcher in scope inside this function. So we're going to include the module bootstrap file at the path, and it's going to have the event dispatcher in its local scope because of the way that's wrapped inside of the function. Okay. And that makes it so that one module isn't polluting the variable scope of another module, unless you like hijack the globals array, which don't do that, please. Okay. So that's how those modules are, how those run in the life cycle. So what does that mean? Well, that means that you have available on a module anywhere where the globals.php file is instantiated. So if you go and you look and you say, well, you know, is my module going to have access to, let's see, is it going to have access to the login page? Well, if I go up to login and I look here and I come up, right, I can see it's got the globals.php. So my module is going to run in here, right? Is my page going to run on, you know, whatever, the calendar or anywhere? Anywhere where this globals.php file is instantiated, your module will execute. And not just your module, all the modules that are activated are going to execute. Okay? From a customization point of view, if you're wondering where can I actually, you know, modify things, that's where your module has access. Okay. So I want to talk about the life cycle of how modules are installed. And this will play into effect when we jump into a demo. I'll be doing a live demo of going through a module. Okay. So the installation of the module is actually handled by a module. Kind of funny that way. So the Laminas installer module has three parts to it. You may have seen this when you've been activating or deactivating modules. So it has a register step, has an installation step, and it has an enable step. Okay. On the registration step, these are done by going to the modules and the manage modules menu. And the register step is going to look for a specific file. It's going to look for this info.txt file. And that info.txt file is going to grab the human readable name of your module And that's what gets displayed on the registration screen. So if we come here, no, there, I need to close that for a moment. If we come here and we look at our module registration, which I blew away my Docker image. So that's why we're here. If we come here to our manage modules, and I look over here on this unregistered. So these are all the modules that are not installed or even registered with the system. And this name is coming from that info.txt file. Whatever is in that file is what's going to be displayed here. If you don't have an info.txt file, it's just going to use the directory name of the module. So what that registration does, when you click that register, it's going to create the module record in the database, right? Until you do register, it doesn't even show up, like OpenEMR isn't even aware of it. It's not, it's just, you've taken the file and you've plunked it down in the file system. OpenEMR only knows that it's there and it has this name, but it's not installed in the database, has no other knowledge of it. When you actually go in and you hit that register, OpenEMR is going to move it over here into the register tab, and it's now available for installation, right? So in the module framework, the installation process is where you install data. This is where your database fields or anything that's going to persist, your state, that's going to persist from page to page is stored. So that is going to, that install process in here is going to look for two specific files in a couple different places. So it's going to look for a table.sql or an install.sql file inside the root of your custom module directory. If it can't find it in the root, it's going to look inside a SQL folder inside the root of your module for a table.sql or an install.sql. Eventually, this is going to be able to have to do kind of version upgrades, similar to what we do in OpenEMR. So the 5.0.0 upgrade to the 6.0.0 file. We have that support for the Laminas modules. We don't have that yet for custom modules. Okay. What's important to note is that these SQL files uses the same OpenEMR database language as what we use in SQL in the SQL upgrade script. So if you look at our SQL files, what we have here for our upgrade, where we have this syntax, if not table, if not row, kind of this domain specific language, this DSL that OpenEMR has built. All of this is available to you inside your table.sql file for being able to add tables, add in columns and all of that. So you can check against OpenEMR, do I have this field? Do I have that? What version am I on, essentially, and then add stuff on your module accordingly. Okay. Like I said, we'll be enhancing that so that you can have additional files that are specific to individual versions of OpenEMR. Okay. Enable. We will eventually change this. I haven't gone in and changed this, but right now, when you install, all it does is do the database. It doesn't activate your module. So you have to then go in once you've installed it and actually enable it. This is, yeah. Every time I do this, I get annoyed and said, I'm going to fix this one of these days. So coming and looking at the module again, I have to hit install, and then I have to hit enable. It needs to be a one step, but so now my module is enabled. It's had that active flag in the module direct database table switched from 0 to 1. My module is now active. Okay. What that means by being active is that it's gonna run every single page load. Every time that this thing refreshes, that module runs. Every time this refreshes, that module runs. Right? Every single page, the module will execute. Okay. Any questions up to this point?
Looks like there's a
So
question on chat. I'm not sure if it's a question.
Let's see. Let me come back to that. Chat, we got a couple questions. Let's see. Define interfaces. Well, yeah, I mean, those are good examples. So I guess I'll just read it, Peter, and then if anybody has any questions. So from a non-programmer's point of view, he wanted to point out that they have defined interfaces that take defined inputs and create defined outputs while providing some function in between. Their strength is that they don't mess with anything else. An example is a municipal subway system. You buy a ticket, input a passenger at a defined location with some parameters, and the passenger is output in a defined location. What happens in between is not the passenger's concern. A calendar appointment pop-up is another. You open it, it presents a way to pick up a date and outputs a date to the calling program. Of course, programmers understand this, but non-programmers might need the framework. I'm a non-programmer with an exposure to programming. Is that useful? So yeah, it makes, in most cases, that's true, Peter, but a module can actually interact with other modules. But the nice thing is, like you're saying, it's all fully encapsulated, right? It allows you to build code that you don't have to worry about, or, there are no side effects, as we like to call it. That when I turn off that module, everything dealing with, if I had a calendar module that we moved all the calendar systems into, and I turned off the calendar module, everything dealing with calendar is gone, right? I don't have to worry about the calendar messing up something that's over in the billing system, because the calendar is turned off, right? So, yeah.
So so let's suppose that we are making changes to.
Did I lose my internet?
Yeah, I think Daniel
Pardon?
cut out.
Hey,
Can
Daniel?
you hear me?
I can hear you now. I said, let's suppose you're making changes too, and then you cut out.
Oh, I'm sorry. So let's suppose we're making changes to the patient demographic screen, and I want to either modify one of the widgets or add a complete new one.
Mhm.
Is that necessarily the best thing to use a module for, or would we make change, or is the approach to make changes to the native code in that situation? And I guess, for example, would be when you display like the patient's name and birth date. Let's suppose you want to display their weight and the last time their weight was taken.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, to me, that's perfectly fine for now. As far as the weight and things like that, I don't see. It would be interesting to know if that's something that's generic enough or that everybody would want. If you think, is every OpenEMR user going to want this feature? Is it kind of a core need, especially like if we're meeting certification requirements? Does it have to be on for everyone? Then that goes into core. If it's like, well, this is only going to help, like maybe weight might be something that would go into core, but as far as adding sections to the patient demographics, unless it's like a meaningful use certification, to me, that's perfect game for a module. That's something that you would want to be able to add and extend and all of that. Yeah.
So one example would be maybe displaying a list of an SMS conversation, and that's in the widget, and you can click on the view and you can expand it. And you have two things. You can add it to the message widget, which is on the main thing, or you can add it to one of the side widgets, right? And I guess it depends. So if I were to add a widget like where you have the immunizations, and if I wanted to put, let's say, SMS history or the most recent like 4 or 5 SMS messages, would that be reason for a module, or would that also be something that we would put into core if it's not for everybody?
I mean, I would say it can all go into modules. Eventually, if you look at the way that the Laminas framework or the Symphony framework or others work, like their entire application is built using modules. Everything is a module. And that's what Peter mentioned in his chat. is that everything kind of builds upon each other via modules, right? So, I mean, if I had another 20-man team and $1 million, I would re-architect OpenEMR so that everything was a module, right? So that you could turn and turn off different functionality. So, I mean, with your example with the SMS, if you're adding widgets, I think that initially I would say put it into a module. If it's something that's going to benefit to everybody and you see that this is working, then yeah, we'll bring it into core. And if you already have it as a module, then most likely what we'll do is we'll put it into core as a always loaded module.
So sort of what I've been doing to sort of maybe prepare to actually do the module the right way is I've been taking a lot of the custom code and I'm trying to avoid putting a lot of custom code into like the core OpenEMR code. So now what I'm doing is I'm separating it and basically so when I'm upgrading from like 501 to 600, I'm bringing in the custom code and then creating a module and then copying those files into the module themselves and then changing, let's say the standard menu.json file. And it's not the best way to do it unless I fully understand what we're doing here today. And I'm just I've seen other coders make the same mistakes that I'm making, and I'm wondering if anyone else is making custom code or have they done the same thing, especially the folks that are here that don't fully understand how to do modules the right way.
So let me walk through. I think now is a good time. We've gone through kind of the core kind of underpinnings, the framework and foundation of the module. Let's dive into an example, okay? An example module using my skeleton framework that I have out there, okay? And I think that as you see that, you're going to see, oh, here's where I want to move some kind of core code into the module, and here's how I can connect that, okay? So, yeah. Let's go back to sharing my screen, okay? So let me just quickly say, and you're going to see this is might be review for some of the people who attended last week, but how is your code actually going to connect via modules? And that's going to be through the event dispatcher, right? In the event dispatcher, when something happens in OpenEMR, you want to connect to the so when something happens in OpenEMR, it's going to fire off an event and say something happened. And at that point, your module is going to have the opportunity to step in and do stuff. The two types of things it can step in is, an action. I want to just do something, or I want to change some value inside of OpenEMR, right? A name or the weight, as you were saying, to display what's displayed, on top of the patient demographics, right? And I'm just going to quickly mention this, and then we're going to jump into the example. So the way that your code's going to connect is by adding a listener to using some kind of key name and a callback that's going to call into your code and have it do something, right? And in OpenEMR, how we actually say, hey, this is what you can do. We're going to fire off saying that the menu updated. This comes from the menu system. The menu updated, you can come in and change the menu using this updated menu event. And I'll show an example of that going through the code, okay? So let me go and this example here. And what we have here is this skeleton. If you have no idea how to make modules and haven't been able to make any modules successfully, I'd say clone my skeleton project and then tweak it, right? Go in and tweak it from the examples of what you're going to want to do. So in this case, I'm going to come into OpenEMR. So this is my OpenEMR root directory. And the modules are going to live in the custom modules, live inside this interface modules, custom modules directory here. Okay. In this case, I have this module that I'm just going to remove, and we're going to clone it again. Well, I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to clone it. Okay. So I have that module now. Which is going to show up here in my code developer. Okay. So looking at the module directory structure, what I have here, here's my info.txt file that I was talking about. Here's the database that's going to be installed, this database table, this mod custom skeleton records, right? And here's my bootstrap file, which is right here. I'm actually going to scroll that text down just a little bit. That's still good enough for everyone to see?
Yep.
Okay. So this is our bootstrap file that's going to be loaded on every page request in my skeleton. Now in this case, I'm going to send in my event dispatcher, and I'm going to send in the kernel here for my project. Let's go here, and it's going to load up source bootstrap. Okay. And it has this file here. I'm just going to go. Does a bit of constructing, and then it's going to actually say, I want to listen into all of these events, right? I'm going to listen into some global settings. I'm going to listen into a menu, to some stuff on the pages, and to the API. And let's just install that and show you what that looks like. Okay. I realize that we've got about 15 minutes, so I'm going to try and go fast on this. Okay. Now, on a module, some of you may have run into this problem before. For those of you who have tried making modules and you've run into problems, and you say, well, my module, like, I'm trying to have it use the autoloader and it's not working. And so it's not finding this bootstrap file. And so I just have to go in and manually bootstrap, manually include it, right? Because it's not, when a custom module doesn't work on the autoloader. Well, if you want to get around, for development purposes, get around that problem, the way that you do that is with this, the composer file. So if you come here to composer, you can see that it's got this autoloader here for the OpenEMR tests and all of that. So if we want to load our module, then we're going to skeleton. I'm going to just copy this file over here. We're going to add in our namespace here, our custom module, the namespace that I defined up here, OpenEMR Modules, custom module skeleton. Get rid of that. And I'm going to say this is where the module folder lies in. If your module already has some keywords that are installed in it, and you install it using Composer instead of like plopping it into the file system, you don't have to do this step. But this is just something, if you have the code that you get cloned, you just pop it into the file system. Okay. And then at that point, I have to reload because I'm running this in Docker, I have to run this command, but I have to reload I have to generate all of the autoload configuration for Composer. And then that will go through and make it so that my code loads and I don't have to do requires everywhere. Okay. So I'm going to come in here on my unregistered, and I'm going to register my module. Right. I'm going to install my module. That installed the database. That's now fresh installed. We're going to You see that my mod custom skeleton records table is now there in the database that got installed, just fine through that install. Now I'm going to enable it. Okay. So if I go to, when I enable it, and I come here to my globals, one of the things that this module does is it says I want to have some configuration that shows up here. I now have in my globals this configuration that shows up automatically. If I turn off my module, disable it, right, reload the page, you can see skeleton modules just before portal. Come here, module is gone, all gone. Turn it on again, and then go here. And there's my module again, right? Now I'm going to just add, this is a test. I'm going to just enable all these features, and then we'll go through them one by one and show examples of the modules. So in this case, I'm going to let the skeleton module override twig files in the system. So my module, anywhere where we're using twig, the module can reach in and replace that twig file. Anything that's inside of OpenEMR, you can replace it with your own module twig file. So for rendering on the presentation layer, I'm going to enable it so that I can, it'll show my menu button. And then I'm also going to jump into the main OpenEMR body page, everything that is on this window that you see up here. And I'm going to add my own style sheet and my own JavaScript file. And that will insert a footer at the bottom of the page. Okay. We're just going to save all that. Now, because the way that module works, to see the footer and everything, I have to log out. Now, if you notice, I now have a module skeleton enhanced login page. Woo! I replaced the login page. So if I wanted to come in here and say, and have my module override that login page, let's come in here to my templates, login. Here's my core login. I just wanted to say, my login page is now what's up, right? So whatever I want, I can come in and I can customize that template using all the data that's injected through the system for my login page, right? From the module. Let's look at the other example and then we'll go through. So you can see here, I've now got my awesome footer. It's being injected via JavaScript and styled via CSS. I'm going to just close that, right? And coming here to my modules, I now have a menu option here, custom module skeleton, right? And I can load up my own kind of application or do whatever I want. Maybe I want a chat thing here. Maybe I want something for telehealth or whatever example. And here's my global values that are being pulled from that administration globals. So this is all doable, and I have not modified anything in core. This is all just inside of a module, can be turned on and off and all of that because of the way that the module is written. Okay. So let's look at each one of those examples one by one. Okay, to give you kind of an idea of the things that you can do inside your module. Okay. So in my bootstrap, I'm going to come here, and the big thing here is my subscribe to events. Let's see. Okay. So let's look at the way that the global settings works. Okay. So global settings says I want to be notified whenever the globals have initialized, right? I want to be able to do something and add my global values. So if I come here and I say, well, you know what, where is this event at? Where's this thing at? Right. So I come here, I'm using it in a couple places, but if I come here to globals, I want to look for where that dispatch is. So this dispatch is using the globals, right? And it says, after we've gone and we've created all of these global values inside globals.inc.php, I'm going to call out to everyone who's listening. If no one's listening, it's going to spend a couple microseconds looping through an empty array and return. So the penalty of if no one's listening is pretty minimal. But it's going to fire off this event and saying, here's the globals, right? Here's the globals metadata and some other specific global data that you would need for modifying these tabs, right? And then that's going to be fired off. So it loops through and finds my module and says, oh, that module has a callback. It has a function that I'm going to execute. So it fires that off. This points to the current class, which is the bootstrap class. And it's going to find a public function, has to be a public function because the dispatcher has to be able to get access to it. It's going to find the public function and get that event. So I get the event, I grab the global service event object from that event, and I'm going to create a section. So if you look at it, you want to know what methods are available in global services. You can see that global services has a save method. It has a create section for being able to add globals, append a section, get the metadata and other pieces like that. Okay. So coming back to Bootstrap, so I'm going to create a section and I'm going to put that section before Portal. So again, coming back to our globals, let's look at this. So I'm going to get that section and I'm going to come here to my skeleton module and you can see that it's being placed before Portal. Right? And I called it skeleton module. If I wanted to, I could call it skeleton module 2, right? And we'll reload this. Reload. Let's see. There we go. Took a second. That was weird. So it's now called skeleton module 2, right? And it has these values. So in here, these were just some helper methods just for good coding styles. I'm going to minimize that, but I'm going to come down here to this global section. Let's see, get globals. We're going to go to the globals config. Here. And here on my globals config, I have these global options. These are my different configuration values for text, encrypted, whether I should allow the twig template, the menu button, the body footer. Each of those individual values. So I'm going to set up my options. What's the title? What's the description? What kind of type is it? You know, for a text, whether it's an encrypted field, a Boolean field, checkbox, and all of that. Right? We can see that here's our Boolean. Here's our encrypted value. Right? And it's going to go through there, each of those values from my config object, and it's just going to append these to the section. Right? Giving it the title, the type, the value, the description, and whether this is a user setting or not for the global. Right? And now you have your own connection into OpenEMR for configuring any global values for your module. Right? So that is that example. Another example that I wanted to go through was, and this I only show the menu and the template if you have these two options filled out in the example. So let's go and look at the menu. So in here, in the menu, I'm going to say, well, is my menu enabled? Again, hey, I want to be notified anytime the menu updates. And when I'm notified, go through and add my custom module menu item, right? I come into my custom module menu and that menu has access to, that event has access to the actual menu that's being created from the JSON file, right? That we used to use to modify menus in the system, right? And I say, I want to target this specific mod. I want it to be underneath the modules menu, right? So I may have to go, if I don't understand how that menu is structured, I may have to come and look at this and look at find usages, right? And say, where is this instantiated? What is the piece? We'll get better at our documentation, but for now, a lot of it helps just go and look at the menu and say, well, what's being passed into this menu parse? What do I have access to that I can modify, right? And it's going to come through and run this menu entries updated. And the menu entries is going to generate the labels and the children and all of those pieces, right? But if that's confusing and reading that code is hard, again, just modify, tweak the example, the skeleton file, and you can get a feel for how that works. So in this case, we're going to go out of main menu and come back to Bootstrap. Right. So here I'm going to go through and say this is where I want it to go to, my interface modules, custom modules, public sample index, which is over here. Right? I want it to go to that public sample index. Right here, that file right there. And it doesn't have any submenus. Sorry, go ahead.
So can we go back up there, because this is actually a question that was put out in the forum quite a few times and never really answered. And I sort of learned through trial and error that the JSON file in the standard.json file. So we have the target and we have the menu ID. So the menu ID, I kind of feel like the JSON file has it. If you have different targets, it opens up different windows, right? So if you wanted to say, let's say, change, I'm just trying to think of something offhand. If you wanted to have certain reports that always had its own tag, you could give it a unique target name.
Yeah. Yeah, the target, I mean, just like the HTML target, right? It's going to go to a specific, window name or window tag, right? And so
if you make
any manual will always go to that. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, so if you make up your own 3-letter thing, it will always open up a new window. And if you have 2 reports that share the same target name, it will occupy the same window if one of those reports is open. And then if you try to open up the other report that owns that target name also, it will just replace.
That's my understanding. Yep.
And then the menu ID. So that one kind of confuses me also, because when you open up the standard.json file, if it's in succession, I feel like the menu ID is sort of redundant.
It may be, except for when you're working with events, right? Because we key off of the menu ID to know where to add things to.
Right, but I guess it's not redundant in this case when you're dealing with modules.
Yep.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay. And there are 2 menu events that you can use. One for when the menu is first created, and another one where it's been after its permissions have been checked. So I'll just throw that out there as far as an implementation. Yeah, I wanted to go through. We're at the top of the hour, but I wanted to talk about I think something that we often want to jump in and do is modify things via JavaScript. And so let me just quickly go through the register template events. Okay, so we went through menu items, we went through the template events, or we're going to go through template events right now. So we have access to, on this render event, again, if you're trying to figure out what can I modify in the system, let's just go here to render event. So if we come here in source into my events folder, let's drop the comment out of the way. Source events, I have listed here all these various events, right? And appointments and core and facility and main. And I say, okay, we have access to this render event that's inside the main tab, right? We're trying to make sure that this corresponds to the folder structure that we have up above, or at least related. Appointments is going to relate to anything to do with the calendar, right? Main tabs is anything that's related to these main tabs, right? So this main tab has its render event, which allows you to insert things before anything else in the body is there and after anything else is in the body, right? So if I come here and I look at find usages, and I come and look at my dispatch, and I can see that this is in main, the main tabs control window, and there's a bunch of code here we have our body tag. At the very top of the body tag, it's going to fire off an event saying, hey, anybody listening, do something. Whatever you want to do, just do it here, right? And it will loop through all the different event listeners, and those event listeners can be silent and do something on the background, or it can output stuff to the screen, right? And in this case, we do it here. And the reason why we're doing this versus like the twig files is because this isn't twig yet, right? If it was a twig, then you could come in and you could, you know, replace certain things without having to do the events, right? But here we've got our render event. And so that's going to dispatch that event. In our skeleton module, this is where things get pretty cool. On that render event, I can go in and I can add in my skeleton module. So this is just going to get this, has a little helper method to say, go and grab the path, right? Which is going to pull in this public directory in this assets folder to this custom modules folder, public assets, right? And then I'm going to say, I want you to load at the bottom of that page, my module CSS file. So if I wanted to restyle like everything about this window and all the outer iframes and all of that stuff, I can do that right here with my CSS file. Maybe someone wants a custom theme, or maybe we're tired of the bajillion different themes that we have in OpenEMR and we only want 2, right? And so we could dump all the rest of them into their own modules that people can turn on or off, right? And then we also have the ability to add in the JavaScript here, right? And again, we don't need to go through that in detail, but this is just a sample of how you can add in JavaScript that's there, that won't pollute the DOM, the window object. It wraps it all inside of an anonymous function. So yeah, so you can come in, and that's where we get that footer that when we log out and we log in and we inspect our footer, we have this here, right? Down at the bottom, we have our body class and we have our script tags. So there's our style sheet that got inserted. There's our skeleton module. And that JavaScript is actually going in when it initializes. It's creating a footer div, giving it a class, stuffing a bunch of HTML in it, appending it to the body, right? And then adding an event listener that says close it when that button is clicked. Right. I actually have written another module. I was thinking of sharing it, but I didn't have permission to share it just yet. For telehealth, we bump a telehealth window right here that stays all the time, you know, a video that talks to the other person all the time here on the screen, right? That is always available no matter what tabs you have open because it's here on the outer layer. Right? We have similar events for here on the calendar. If you want to connect into the calendar and load up a JavaScript and a CSS file. But I think that's my time as far as going through this example. I didn't get into the twig, but it's available from the repository if people want to look at that. It's a little bit more complicated of an example, but we may cover that another day. But what I want to do is just briefly go through. First off, what do you need to do to actually push your module out to people? If you've gone in and you've created this great code that you want to share and you want it to get out to the broader community, the things that you need to be able to set up the autoloader and to be able to have it available is first set up your composer.json in your module. And if we look at my composer.json, that has a couple key things. You need to set your type of composer package to be an OpenEMR module. This is used by this package that you'll need to install, that you'll need to have inside your module called the module installer plugin. And it will key off of this type that you have here. And it will go through and it will install your module directly inside of the interface modules, custom modules folder. And then stuff whatever you have here in your PSR4 autoloader into the autoloader for OpenEMR, right? So you need to have this piece here and this piece here and your PSR4 if you're going to use the autoloader. Now you can use requires, or if you don't even want to use classes and you just want to do functional coding, you don't want to do even any classes, you can use the event dispatcher just right here. And you can just start connecting your events here on, let me just grab an event dispatcher right here. Right? I can just, if I don't even want to do classes, I can just have this be my function, my func, right? And I could have this be a render event, and I can do just straight up functional programming. So you can do whatever you want. If you want to insert a Laminas framework, you would have to, or not Laminas, a Laravel, you'd have to fire off their kernel that they have there and run it inside your module, but you could run the Laravel framework directly from in here. So the sky is kind of the limit of what you have available, available for your modules. My hope is that you'll share them as we have a broader community and we can start sharing them. The way you can share them, I mean, you can just email people different modules and files, but put it on packages. So create a packages account if you're not one. Actually, we don't want packages.com, we want packages.org. So if you, packages is where all the composer libraries come from. And if you search for OpenEMR, right, there's the fax module, there's a couple other modules right here, this module demo farm, we'd like to see more. There's my skeleton project that's available from the module. Make sure to use git tags because Composer uses tags to be able to pull your modules in. And then to install it is pretty straightforward. You just do a Composer require your package name, whatever you name your package right here, Composer require. So if I wanted this, instead of doing that git clone, and I wanted to do it inside of my OpenEMR package, I can just do a Composer require, Composer require, and it will do that. If I want a specific version, obviously I can set what version I want, right? And that will install it into OpenEMR. So that is, I think that was a deep dive and also some general overview. I want to open it up for questions. I know we are definitely past the top of the hour, but I want to open it up for questions that people may have about using modules. If you don't have questions, I have 2 questions that people submitted to me since they weren't going to be here, but I'd rather go through your questions first rather than the people who didn't show up.
I've got a simple one and then maybe a more complicated one, but it seems to me that every single module starts with OE dash.
Yeah.
So, yeah, okay, and I take it that stands for OpenEMR.
Yeah, OpenEMR. You don't have to, but just by convention, it makes it easier to search.
Okay, and then the second question. So, for example, let's suppose if I wanted to create an event listener that checked for, let's say, a new appointment. And then you have the listener, and then you could trigger something that would check that patient's eligibility, to make sure that they're insured, or, because I think there is an eligibility thing. So that would be like maybe one example of a module.
Yeah. I mean, I want to do an eligibility check, right? And you can do that with the couple events. The appointment render event will get, actually, let's see. I want to go here, appointment set event. So this set event, I would have named it appointment add.
I think you have to share your screen.
Oh, is my screen? Oops, sorry. Okay. Thanks, Brady.
Yep.
No, not that screen. Share screen. Okay. So the appointment set event gets fired, if I remember correctly, it gets fired every time the event is added.
That
So,
won't help you on eligibility though. You have to go into the eligibility module and set up your event dispatchers there.
yeah, so you're saying that if we go to eligibility, right?
Yeah, there's not a, it's embedded. It's a separate script.
Well, I think
there's-
this actually answers a question that someone else had. Jerry, where, do you remember the name of that script? Where is it at?
No, but
Okay.
before we get off the call, I'll tell you.
Yeah, because let's see, if we wanted to, I'm just
There's
thinking of,
there is a hook in main.php for the report to the demographics widget. That's probably where you're going to hook
you
for
mean
the
to
button.
add it as a button? I mean, for the.
There's a button there. You probably set up an event dispatcher for the button or the routine that's there to generate the report.
Mm-hmm.
But you can actually go out if eligibility is set up and grab eligibility on a specific patient and get the report for that patient. Then it gets populated there in the demographics eligibility tab under insurance. That's where I go.
If I knew the name of it, I would actually go in and
It's
show
in
you
main.
how to
No, it's in demographics.php, I believe.
demographics.php. Let's go to demographics.php. And it's hard for me to see. Let's see. So let's see.
Search for
Let's just take an example. What I want to do is talk about what if I need to tie into something or I want to go in and listen to an event, right? Let's say, for example, get employer data, right? Common function. You say, I know we're talking about eligibility, but I want to say that I need an event here, right? I need to do something and modify this given name from employer data or this query before it goes out, right? If I wanted to, if I was just hacking core code, right, then I could come in and just change this query. If I wanted it to be an event, there's a couple things that I can do. So one is first just wire things up so that I know I understand what I'm getting and what I'm doing. So I'm going to do here, I'm going to grab the event dispatcher, which is in globals, kernel, get event dispatcher, right? And I'm going to have it dispatch an event. In this case, I want it to be I'm just going to do something generic while I'm still thinking through employer.data.post or something like that. .filter, I'm going to call it that way. Right? And I'm going to send it a new generic event, which is something that Symfony gives us. Right? And I'm just going to give it a SQL, give it the SQL piece as the thing, right? So this piece, I've gone in and I've modified core. This is not how I want it to be, but if I did want to leave it this way, I'd submit a pull request and say, now I can listen to this event. Well, this isn't my end result, but I would be able to then say, okay, let me make sure that that's working for me. I'm going to come over here to my event dispatcher and let's do it inside of Bootstrap. Subscribe to events. Right? I'm not going to make a new function here. I'm just going to go event dispatcher, add listener, right? And my event name here is whatever we called that, employer data filter. Right? And I want it to give it a function. So I'm going to give it my filter employer data. So Now I say, okay, well, that's connected, filter employer data. Now I want to modify that query. So I'm going to grab, let's make sure I got that here. The generic event has a subject, which is what it takes in the first argument. And I'm just going to say my SQL is this, right? So now I can come in and I can change this to be whatever I wanted it to be, right? I can change this to be here. Just come here to my query, select given, and then patient data dot PID. Maybe I need the patient data as part of this employer data or something like that, right? I've already got the PID there. Maybe we'll get the F name and patient data dot L name from employer data, right? And so on. So I don't need to go through all that example, but I can come in here. I've got that modified. I'm now going to, oh, I forgot about generic event. So we're going to leave that to be, sorry, this is what I get when I'm doing coding on the fly. I'm going to leave that and put this as the argument here. So subject is something usually you can use for page name. In this case, it would be patient.inc or whatever is this thing is about. And we're going to pass in the argument because I need to be able to modify the value of the event. So here, I'm going to do get argument, set argument, my new modified value, and I'll return the event. Right. So now I've gone through and I've changed what that value is, you know, and I had a developer who asked me like, how do I make this generic? Like, I mean, how do I make sure that I'm not just creating, you know, tightly coupled code in my module? You know, how do I know that I make it, whether it's going to be a generic enough event, right? Because when we review a pull request, we particularly aren't going to like you using generic event, but it works for when you're testing things out and trying to figure out, is this going to work for modifying core? But our goal in reviewing your code when you submit an event of something you want to change is you're going to say, what is the other use cases here? What other things are you going to want to do or other people are going to want to do? Maybe we don't want you modifying the full query. So maybe we need to send in not the query here, but send in this given value and let you choose the particular columns right here for given. Is that going to work, right? What am I going to name this event? In this case, I would probably name it employer data filter, right? To give it the name of the event in my pull request, right? So those are the types of things as we're trying to think about, okay, so I'm going in and now I need this event, I need to modify something in core. How do I do that? And how do I then get it into the code base? And the key goal there is just thinking about who else would use this, who else would want to modify it, what kinds of things, how do I name it? And then that typically goes in fairly quick into the code base, just because this doesn't use up that much processing. If there's security risks or things like that, we may have some questions like passing around passwords, you know. But that was the last thing that I wanted to. So I hope that covers everything.
Well, real quick, Daniel, for that, if you're looking at eligibility, there in demographics.php, around line 954, the function call is to the EDI270.php called request eligible transaction.
Right.
That'll go out and do the transaction, and then there's another function call called show eligibility information that will give you the report for that transaction.
Mm-hmm.
So you could do all your hooks right there, I think.
Yeah. So you could add it, I mean, either here or you could add it inside of this class. I think if you added it inside the class, that'd be better. That's more generic. Because this class, wherever it's going to be used, you can then tie into your event. If you need
Actually, it's
to
not a
render
class.
something, not a class.
I don't think it is. I don't know. It's been a while. Steven may have made it a class.
Yeah, it looks like it's a class. So,
Is it? All right.
yeah. So these are things where our hope is that we could have, you know, several dozen, hundred, maybe a couple hundred events. We'll have to organize them, get better at organizing all of them, but things that you can tie into via OpenEMR, right? So, any other questions at this point?
I noticed that the event was being recorded. Will it be posted? I was doing quite a couple things, so I wasn't
Yeah,
able to
we're
follow.
recording right now. Yep.
All right, great, thank you.
Yeah, it would be very, very useful to be able to review this because you want to stop every so often and absorb what's going on and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, there is a lot.
Yes.
We went through a
Great
lot.
job, thank you.
Yeah, happy to help.
And I missed last week. Is that one also recorded somewhere?
That one is recorded. We got to do a little bit post-recording cleanup. There were some things that needed to be removed from the call. So when we do that, we'll get that out.
Hey guys, I have two questions. May
Yeah.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you very much, Steven. I was able to install your skeleton model on Friday successfully. So first question is, as I see, one option is to subscribe to events, but if I don't need to subscribe to events, because my goal is to review patients' last visits and encounters, and then kind of take data, pass it to machine learning, get data from machine learning, pass it back to the system. What's the best approach to access these entities and data? Should I use API, or maybe there is any other approaches better here?
So you're saying you want to be able to access the end user's information, right? Is that
Yeah.
what you're?
Yeah.
Like the patient data and things like that?
Yeah.
Are you going to be accessing it outside of OpenEMR, or will they log into OpenEMR and you need to do something with the data?
Yeah, I won't do anything with data. I will just analyze it and create, let's say, new visit and put some data there because I don't want to modify any data, right? And now I'm creating the model, and my system working using Python, but it's another story. Let's assume it's a separate model which do some calculations with patient data and then create new records in database, let's say new visit or something like that.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're going to be working inside of OpenEMR, as far as creating data, you want to pull the data and create the data. You can do that. I mean, you can do that as a module. You can do that as a smart app. You can do that as through the API. There's many different ways that you can do that.
Yeah, I mean, inside the model, if I think now the best approach, and you suggest to do it inside the model. So
Yeah.
using this in model, should I still use API, or there's a better approach, and we can discuss it later? I can ask on forum this question.
I mean, I guess the question is an end user, like, is whoever you're building this for going to come in and review the data and look at it?
Yeah.
Then you're going to need to at least do something with inside the module, and then you can use any of the services as the module, or if it's easier and a cleaner approach to you have the API. It's kind of a tomato, whatever. If it's easier for you to work with REST APIs, then you can use the REST API. If it's not, then you can use the services. We have the patient service, we have user service, we have the vital service.
Okay.
All those services. So
Yeah. Okay, that's clear. Yeah. Thank you.
yeah, Brady, I know we're kind of at the end where you probably need to be taken off. Is there any other questions?
Thank you for holding this. This is going to be really, really helpful, and I look forward to next week as well.
Yeah, well, we won't be, so Robert jumped the gun. He wanted to have a presentation before. We're just doing this once a month. So,
Okay.
but you're welcome to join us on the call. It becomes an open call at that point. We do all the other weeks of the month is an open call, and we talk about all things tech related, with OpenEMR. So same time. And
Sounds
we're
good.
hoping if any of you have things that you wanted to present on or talk about with OpenEMR, I'm very happy to include you in a lightning talk presentation. Maybe it's something that you're doing with your company that you want to like say, hey, this is some cool thing that we've done and we want to show it off. Or if you want to just talk about a topic, we'd love to have community involvement. And so I guess we call for proposals, maybe request for proposals, whatever it's called. So just let me know or message me on the forum. That'd be great. Okay, if there's nothing else, I'm gonna hit stop recording. I guess I did have, if we had one other question from somebody who had emailed it to us. So someone asked, how's this gonna affect performance? I already went through, and let me share my screen just one last time. So somebody had submitted this question. So someone says, if we have hundreds of these events firing, like, are we wasting resources until something is listening? Is this why systems like WordPress are so slow? That was one of the questions that someone emailed me about. And I would say that if you're concerned about performance, there's a couple things you need to pay attention to when you're working with a module. One is be very careful when you're doing network requests. So anytime you have to do an external API call that's outside of EMR, OpenEMR, or even in OpenEMR, you're going to slow down because it runs on every page request. If you're doing a network request on every page request, you're going to slow things down. If a better way to approach that is to say, maybe I do if it's data that can be cached, maybe I do that request every 5 minutes, or maybe I store it in the database and I cache it. So the biggest thing to watch out for is network requests. Next biggest thing is database requests. So if you can cache the data in the constructor of your module, if you're going to be using it throughout the rest of your module on multiple events that are happening, that can be better. Or lazy load it and then cache it inside the module, inside of a variable, inside a class. That's a good way for optimizing performance. Another thing is to use the Redis server. If your OpenEMR is installed with Redis, you can store variables in the Redis cache and store data there instead of hitting the database. You usually get it's typically a 10 to 30 millisecond response versus sometimes a 300 millisecond or even 1 second response when you're hitting large data streams. So storing that in Redis can be a massive improvement. So those are things that if the more we have modules and the more that you do at the database, you can slow things down if you get to hundreds or thousands of modules that are interacting. But when there's only like 20 or 30 modules installed on a system, and performance is going to be pretty negligible if you're not doing an external network request. So, I mean, and if there's no listeners, it's microseconds. I mean, it checks if the array of listeners is empty and then returns. So you could have hundreds of these and you'd only have a few milliseconds of additional performance.
I think that's what the core of that question was about.
Yeah.
Having all the listeners admit once globals comes up and just sitting there doing nothing.
Yeah. And you can have hundreds, or I would argue, I haven't benchmarked this. I would say you could have thousands of listeners, and it's going to be pretty negligible to performance.
Yeah, I had that question a couple months ago and looked into it.
Yeah,
like you say.
Yep. Okay. If anyone has last call for questions, otherwise I'm going to stop the recording and then we'll bid you farewell. Or if anyone else wanted to stay on the call, we could spend a few minutes after I've turned off the recording. So, but any other questions? Okay, I will stop recording.